Hello, this is Chris Safarova. Welcome to another episode of the Strategy Skills Podcast. Before we start today's interview, I have a gift for you. If you want to strengthen your strategy skills, get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies, free download. Go to firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. It is firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. And today we have with us Manisha Thakor. Manisha has worked in financial services for more than 30 years and has been featured in a wide range of publications such as Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNN. Manisha also earned her MBA from Harvard Business School. Manisha, welcome. So great to have you with us.
Chris, thanks for having me on.
Manisha, so being stuck on the proverbial hamster wheel, running as fast as possible but never arriving at the finish line, is something that many of our members experience. And we are all extremely driven, hardworking people. Many of us don't even know how to rest anymore. We kind of try, but we're really good at working, and we are not very good at taking care of ourselves. And this, of course, can result in burnout, depression, loneliness, to name just a few things that can happen. And you were able to free yourself. So let's talk about that. And I know it is a deep topic to cover, but I think that if we could help our listeners today to identify specific things they can do to not regret later on, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, to actually live a much better life and much healthier life. And also, as you mentioned in your book, working very long hours does not mean that you accomplish a lot. At some point, you actually hurt yourself without getting benefits from such long hours. So let's talk about that. Maybe let's start with some practical tips on how can someone gain some balance.
I think the term balance, to be honest, doesn't work in this context. I really feel like those of us who are super type A and really driven, balance really doesn't fit our rubric of how we think. And so I like to say, what is a new mental model that we can adapt that allows for both periods of extreme productivity, but not at the expense of our physical health, our relationships with people we care about, our connection to community. Trying to obtain balance is not going to get you there, but a new mental mindset, which requires unpeeling a number of layers from the proverbial onion, will.
So then let's talk about that mindset. What are some of the components?
Well, the first thing is a lot of the kind of wellness practices that I see being pushed on those of us who are striving and want to make meaningful contributions in our professional lives. You know, we're told to meditate, to go to the gym. We're told to do yoga and nature bathe by walking in the grass. Well, all of those things help, but they're Band-Aids. And so what we need to do to establish a new mindset is multifaceted, so we can explore the different pieces as we go along. But step number one is understanding how you got to these work habits to begin with. And just to further parse that, I have found through the research that I did to try and pull myself. I mean, basically what happened to me, I'm turning 53 next month. I woke up at age 50 after a very serious health scare and realized I had spent my entire adult life as a human doing and not a human being. So I want to figure out how the heck, I'm a smart person. How the heck did I end up in there? And how can I get out of it? So step one is understanding how you got in there. And the first part of that, a lot of people aren't going to like the answer I'm going to give you because it's not fun. And that is exploring the personal reasons, generally the things that happened to us before age 25 that made us so driven that we wanted to excel. And honestly, a lot of the reasons can be embarrassing or stuck in our subconscious. So I'm just going to tell you mine. I'm mixed race and I grew up in a small town in Indiana. And there are very few people there are very few non-white people. And I was chubby and I had Coke bottle glasses and I did not fit in with the cheerleaders and the football players. And I was teased mercilessly. The two nicknames were the biggest were Thunder Thighs and Cow Butt. And now, this is when I'm kind of 11 to 14 years old. You might think like, well, how can that be driving you as a successful person in your 50s? But honestly, until I realized that I was so determined never to be in a position where somebody could ostracize me like that again, I wasn't able to start opening up to having different work habits, to considering moving on that hamster wheel in a different way, and maybe getting rid of the wheel altogether. So that's the first step. I call these small T traumas. And I think they are dramatically under discussed. And I've heard in several unique situations where I am around exceptionally high level C-suite individuals in a context where people are comfortable opening up. And I have been shocked at, I'd say about 75% are at least partially driven by some kind of small T personal trauma.
Yes, that is very familiar to me as well. Working with clients, my own experience, yes, it usually comes from childhood and we are driven by it. So what would be your advice on how can someone uncover the reason why they are the way they are in terms of work?
I can tell you in my own life, it didn't come from therapy. It came from the fact that I realized I have not been back to Indiana since I left at age 18 to go to college. Okay, so that might be symptom number one. I have not stayed in touch with anyone from that part of my life. And third and finally, it wasn't until I was in my early 40s that I could even discuss my grade school years without crying. So you might have some physical or behavioral reactions around that small T trauma that you in your head, I wasn't walking around thinking, oh, those incidences are driving me to work like a maniac. But, when I look back in retrospect, there are clues, there are signals. Certainly therapy can help. And many of us these days work with coaches to up-level our performance in business. And honest to goodness, these things can bubble up. When I say therapy, I don't mean you have to lie down on a sofa. In the context of up-leveling your game, you can ferret out some of these conversations by discussing your early life experiences up to age 25, which is not something a lot of us do.
That is very true. And I think also, if you really dig down, it usually has something to do with you feeling not enough during that childhood period of your life, and you not feeling a sense of belonging.
100%. 100%. I felt empty and not enough. And so what I did was throw myself into academics, and I was smart. So, I'm getting straight A's and my teachers love me because I am really, diving into my academics, and I love the accolades that I get from the teachers with my grades. and it becomes like a drug, because then you move into the workplace, and what happens there? How do you get accolades? Well, you get money, you get promotions, you get status and prestige, and there's no end to that in sight. And so if there is a hole in you, there's a Buddhist concept called the hungry ghosts that they say walk among us with throats as small as a needle, and they can never get enough food, which is why they're always hungry, because the throat is so small. And that metaphorically is what happens when those of us who don't feel whole, even if it's subconscious, try and fill that with money, work, success, accomplishments. And it then drives us to have a toxic relationship with those things, which brings me to kind of the second point of how do you, the onion. And that is addressing the cultural and social behaviors that further encourage you to do this.
So once you discovered what was the reason why, what were your next steps to start freeing yourself?
Sure. So if small T traumas are the first thing you need to investigate to kind of understand, if we start at the big picture, I'm stuck on this 24/7 hamster wheel. Like, it just feels like no matter how much I earn, how much I do, how much I achieve, the finish line keeps moving forward. And I'm wearing this busy badge. Like, I'm just constantly on the go. And it doesn't feel like I'm living. I feel like a human doing, not a human being. And I'm stuck in it. And I don't have time to kind of even figure out. So what I'm saying is, you want to take time to understand three pieces. The first is, are there any small T traumas driving you? For 75% of the people, the answer will be yes. For 25% of the people, the answer will be no. Then we move into the next piece, which is social and cultural influences that drive us into this cult of never enough. And then the final piece we can talk about, which is evolutionary biological pieces. But in cultural and social, essentially, we are, in the US in particular, given a sense of worth in our communities and the people around us by the answer to the question, what do you do? And we've been encouraged to take our work to not just be a career, but a calling. And it becomes so rooted in our identities that it feels like somebody is trying to rip away one of the core things that we need for survival, if they're trying to tell us to be balanced, to work less. And the other piece of this is that, hustle culture is glamorized. There's so many hashtags, thank God it's Monday, and, no one ever changed the world in 40 hours a week. And so, we're not getting true heartfelt messages that say you are more than just your work and your income and your accomplishments. We don't get that message, particularly in the US. And so recognizing that is step number 2. Now, these aren't the actual solutions, but these are the necessary steps to tee you up to move on to the solutions. So identify the small T traumas, identify the cultural and social influences. And I should mention one other, which is that we're humans. We compare ourselves to each other. But comparisons have gotten out of control because of easy access to credit over the last 30 or so years. It is so simple to live beyond your means. And so you look at, your neighbor, and they're vacationing in St. Bart's and they've got the latest, Tesla or BMW, and their kids are going to this private school and they're getting their suits tailored in Hong Kong and having them sent back, and you think, well, if they're doing that, what? Oh, I should be able to do that too. And, so it's so easy to start living beyond your means. And then you have to keep running faster to earn the money to catch up with living beyond your means, which started not because you wanted that stuff, but because you saw other people having it and it was bestowing status on them. And subconsciously, you got sucked into that.
It's interesting, Manisha, because I can see it from both sides. So I know that the reason I was able to do the good in the world that I was able to do up to this point was because I worked so hard and nonstop from the time I was a child and up to now, and I'm not stopping. But from another side, I also know that I do push the limits, and sometimes my body tells me that you push the limit. And so I understand that you have to have enough self-care as part of that formula as well, to make sure that you take care of your body, and that, especially when you're mission driven, and it is not about keeping up with someone, but it is about what you need to do, you feel that you came here to do. And I know many of our members in the audience are in a similar boat. They're not doing it because of ego. They're actually
right. Oh, right.
They're doing it because they know that they want to. They know that firstly they work so hard to accumulate all this knowledge. Now combined with their talents and with the unique willingness to do the work, now they can actually really do something that will matter, that will leave things better for their children and for all the people. And then, but then the thing is that when it's very, you're right, you're in the right place, Manisha, because everyone listening to this, our community we are all like that. We are all extremely driven people, and we are all broke out of our orbit multiple times. No one expected us to break even once, and we are now so far beyond where anyone thought would be possible for us. But then at the same time, we take it a little bit too far often. And then what I would love for our listeners to walk away with at the end of our discussion is some practical things they can do. But I think that before we can do that, we still need to clarify a little more why it's important for them to do it. Because I know that the resistance that comes when someone tells you you're working too hard, you need to be resting, the resistance comes, okay, I'm working too hard, yes, but also because I worked too hard all this time, all my life, those are the things that I was able to do, not just for myself, but for everyone else. And so how do we address this?
So you bring up such a good point, which is that most of us end up here because there's something that we are trying to do that we think will make a difference. And so first I want to give a little distinction between work engagement, which is you love what you do, but when you step away, you can stop thinking about it completely and focus on all the other things that are going on in your life. That's healthy work engagement. What most of us have is a form of workaholism where even when we're not working, we can't cut it off. And what happens then is our brains never free up to have the space to marinate. And you hear the cliche, I got the idea in the shower. Well, literally, scientifically speaking, the reason why a lot of people get the idea in the shower is because that's one of the few places where you are generally just kind of calm and hanging and feeling nurtured. And so why is this so important to do? Well, the number one reason is your health. And I can tell you, I've had two near-death experiences. The first, I was on a trip in Laos with my ex-husband, because marriages are often a very common casualty of what we're struggling with here. But he's an off-road motorcyclist, and we were riding in the jungles of Laos, and I got bit by an infected mosquito, came down with dengue fever, which a lot of people get. But I had severe complications. And when that happens, there's risk of organ failure. And I had it was Murphy's Law of things that went wrong. But by the time I finally made it through the part where literally the doctors had called my family, everyone's around the bedside, I think I'm going to die, and I'm having that. It's true, when you think you're going to die, you don't say, I wish I had worked more. But guess what happened? When I was finally able to have enough energy to start thinking about work, even while I was still in the hospital, I had my assistant come in to set a game plan for how I was going to make it through the 2 months of bed rest that I was told I'd have to be on. Fast forward a number of years, I came down with severe inflammation. There's something called a SED rate. The SED rate of 1 to 20 is a marker of inflammation in your body. That's normal. Above 100 is indication of tumor and malignancy. Mine was 95. I had red welts all over my body. I had 101 to 103 degree fever. And then I started not being able to stay awake. Literally, it got to the point where I could stay awake about 5-6 hours a day. Turned out I had Epstein-Barr, which is a version of mono. So what shingles is to chickenpox, Epstein-Barr is to mono. So normally it wouldn't be a horrible thing. It's a virus that lives in your body triggered by anxiety. But because I had the distress on my organs during dengue fever time that I did not give time to heal, when this next thing came up, I was out flat for almost 9 months. And so you may think I don't have time to slow down, but none of us want to be out of what we care about for 9 months. So reason one is our health. Reason two is our relationships. There are a lot of us who end up with kids who don't like us or don't talk to us anymore because they feel we've neglected them. Spouses that leave us for somebody else who pays more attention to them. That was my case. And, we have ailing parents, and we don't spend the precious time we could with them. And then we regret it later. I've seen so many people, in my age cohort in their 50s, really regretting that as their parents age, because they were in the peak of their mission-driven, successful work, that they didn't make time for them. And then also, oftentimes we find ourselves not giving back to community. We're mission-driven, but we're only giving back to community in a way oftentimes that's connected to our work. There's not like this heartfelt, spontaneous giving back in small other ways because we don't have time to think of them.
Manisha, I'm so sorry to hear about your experiences, health related. I'm so glad that you're okay. I also had a few near-death experiences. I totally understand what you went through. And I'm so glad that you brought up health, because really health is the most important reason, guys. You need to do it. And then relationships, of course, is another reason. And people who love you, they probably will still love you in most cases. Parents, they will not go anywhere, at least. When someone, I know for myself that if I had a mom who was working very hard, no matter how hard she would work, I would still love her. So I think, but health is something that is, if you damage it with working like that, it's very hard to regain. And it's just really not worth it.
Well, and I think about health kind of on an umbrella basis. You've got your physical health, and then you have your relationship health. And for different people, things happen in different ways. As you say, no matter how much your mom worked, you're still going to love her. I have other friends, moms who, ended up in the C-suite, whose kids are so bitter at the significant events. Yeah, they still love them, but they're bitter and they're angry, and it probably won't be until they're in their late 20s, early 30s that they make peace with the fact that, mom or dad was driven, really good at what they did, and focused. And so you can hurt your physical health, you can hurt your relationship health. And then, and this may be the one that gets most of us to finally take a step, is we can hurt the health of our desired results, because it turns out when you push this hard, you don't generate your highest quality work. You are not working effectively. You are not giving yourself space to incubate the kind of breakthrough ideas that, we all know in our professional orbits that oftentimes it's one or two ideas over the span of our entire career that drives extensive success. And then, of course, we have to do all of the steps to implement it. But those ideas, those nuggets, it is so hard for them to bubble out when we don't give them any space to incubate and formulate and grow. And so I think the biggest damage that we do, and why you want to get out of this cult of never enough, is that by thinking you're, not working enough, you're actually dramatically increasing the odds that you will be less productive, less successful, and less able to help the people that your mission-driven business is trying to help, all because you won't shift your mindset away from do more, be more, have more. And when I say have more, I don't mean things. I mean knowledge, skills, products. And so that's that health bucket. You were so right. And it's multi-pronged, but the physical one, you don't have that. You don't have anything.
Very true. Manisha, so if you could go back to that moment on the plane when that lady gave you pills to help you keep working, and you feel that was the moment when you really got into this never enough hamster wheel, what would you tell yourself if you could shake yourself up in that moment and talk to yourself?
Well, let me give a little context for listeners. So I am kind of in my first big career peak. I had an idea for a new business within my firm, and I pitched the idea, and I basically was told, go for it, but we're not giving you any budget. So on a shoestring, took me about 10 years, but I ultimately grew a wealth management division that ultimately had $6 billion in assets under management. And for 10 years, I'm on a plane like 40 weeks out of the year, updating existing clients, raising funds, and researching companies that we're going to be investing in. And so one day I'm on the plane, and I'm sitting in seat 1B. I've got my papers strewn all over the trays. If memory serves me right, I was flying from Houston to New York, and I just had tears streaming down my eyes. I was so exhausted, and I had no idea how I was going to make it through the 2 days of meetings just from from pure physical exhaustion. And this woman back in 4B, she came up to the restroom and then came back. She saw my face. And like I said, I had seen her at various different conferences, but I didn't know her. She comes up to me with this beautiful engraved silver pill case, opens it up like a fairy godmother, and says, "Here, take these. And she hands me these 3 yellow tablets and says, just a half to start. And so, I mean, like a kid grabbing for candy, I'm like, I'll take anything to make it through. And I took the half and it helped. And then I took, I finished the stash. And then, the next time I bumped into her at a conference, it was probably several months later, she said to me, oh, so the Valium helped. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I never even thought to ask what I was taking. That's how stressed I was. And so I guess the point is that we can come to a lot of different breaking points. I was probably like 36 maybe when that happened. But again, as we've talked about, I learned something, but that, I think what happens to people like us is we bump our heads. We have to hit the brick wall several times before we finally viscerally feel that while we don't need to hop on the work-life balance wagon, we do need to understand that building our financial health, which may be our business or our personal household finances, at the exclusion of investing in our emotional wealth, will result in a very unpleasant, lonely, stressful existence.
Manisha, so what would you tell yourself if you could come and no one could see what you're saying? The time stopped. No one can see what you guys are talking about. You came and talking to yourself in that moment before you took that pill. Because the reason it that way, because you said that was the beginning of that rat race for you, a real rat race.
Right. What I would say to myself now is, okay, girlfriend, you are living to optimize your life for the equation self-worth equals net worth. And you need to change that equation. You need to optimize your life for the equation financial health plus emotional wealth equals MoneyZen. And you, my dear, right now have 0. Your balance in your emotional wealth bucket is 0. You got plenty of money in that financial health, the professional bucket. You got nothing in emotional wealth. And here's the interesting thing. There's a study that came out years ago, and most of us kind of laugh when we hear it. It says that $75,000 is kind of the limit that you need to earn in order to be happy. And anything above that doesn't really increase your happiness. And people who live on the East and West Coast, like from the beginning, were rolling their eyes like, right, who can, raise a family on that? But some new research came out this year at the University of Pennsylvania that said, turns out that that study is wrong, but it's not wrong because the number is too low. It is wrong because if you increase your income and net worth in the absence of a foundation of financial well-being, your life satisfaction will not increase. Yeah, you may be able to buy more services and things to make your life easier, but your deep, true enjoyment of life will not manifest itself, cannot be present in the absence of a foundation of emotional well-being. That's why we need to be investing. The return on investment in our emotional wealth bucket actually may be higher than in the financial health bucket, because it enables the synergy of the two to come together and put you in this place where you feel like you've identified, you found your enough, you found the mix of activities and focus just the way you want to be in the world, your own unique definition of enough. And then that enables you to step off this nonstop striving because you're not constantly looking for more. I'm not saying you stop achieving and creating and growing as a human, but you're doing it from a place of wholeness because you've got that emotional wealth bucket being invested in. And you are doing it from a sense of peace. And it's a very hard thing to describe, but you know it when you arrive there. And what I can tell you is if I say to you, you need to not check your devices on the weekends, you need to take more vacation, you need to go do yoga and meditate, and your eyeballs are rolling, you need to be, you need what we are talking about right now. And so that's what I would have told myself in retrospect.
Manisha, what do you think would be your reaction with the mindset that you had at that time?
Oh, I would have been like, okay, this woman telling me to do these things is a flippin' moron. She's never going to amount to anything. Like winners don't do that. Winners are all in all the time. And what I've come to realize is there are seasons. There are seasons when we're all in, and then there's seasons when we can step back. But until we accept the fact that if we do not pursue our professional ambitions on a foundation of emotional well-being, which will mean different things to different people. I don't have children. I deliberately did not have children because I was very ambitious in my career. And at that time, I knew that if I had children early on, I would get moved off onto the mommy track. So, I don't regret that choice, but there are other choices I do regret. But I have been able to create financial well-being as it relates to my interests and my mindset only over the last couple of years. And as a result of that, ironically, my financial health has improved because I'm coming to all of the work that I do from a completely different space. So I wish I could give a specific formula, but what I'd like listeners to take away are three things. Number one, if you hear the phrase achieve less or permission to achieve less, and it makes you want to dry heave, then that is a sign that you need to give yourself some permission in certain small areas to achieve less so that you have time to invest in the emotional wealth bucket. The next thing is, what is a small step that you can take to move there? Well, when you are feeling you are so overwhelmed and you have like no idea how you can get it all done, I want you to sit there and ask yourself, for what? I'm doing this for what? And I want you to keep asking for what. And you can write out the answers until you finally get at the core of why you're doing that. And then you can decide, does it make sense? Sometimes we get trapped down a path of doing something and the for what made sense at the beginning, but it doesn't make sense now. And so when you are overwhelmed, one small step you can start taking is looking at the thing that is most overwhelming you and doing the for what, so you get down to the layers. And then if that doesn't release enough tension in time, you can move to the next thing on your list. And then that's a way to help you prioritize. The third tip that I'd like people to take away is a phrase and a question. The phrase is, connection creates balance. If there is anything to this work-life balance thing that can help people like us, it's that phrase. Connection creates balance. So when you feel out of balance, what you want to do is ask yourself, to whom or what do I need to be connected right now to feel better? Wide range of answers to that. It might be you need to be connected to yourself, and you need to do that by getting 8 or 10 hours of sleep because you're sleep deprived. It may be that you need to talk to your spouse because you miss your spouse and you just want to be reminded of your humanity. It may be that you have to fire a big client because that experience is not worth it. But by asking to who or what you need to be connected and forcing yourself to take some kind of action that will move you, even if it's just incrementally, to feel happier than you do right now. That's how you'll start on the journey.
Thank you, Manisha. This is so helpful. And then in terms of growing emotional wealth, could we unpack it a little bit more? I know it will be different for different people, but maybe some examples that you're noticing are most common, will be most relevant.
I can give you some examples from my own life. I have a nephew who I adore, and like most kiddos that are 7 or 8 years old, he's got very restricted screen time access. Otherwise, he'd be on his devices all day. So one day he saved up all his screen time to talk to me. And we don't get a chance to talk often. So he reached out to me, and I happen to be in LA, and I'm busy doing my thing. And I'm like, he reaches out, and I was about to go pick up some food to eat. And I'm like, I don't have time. And he says to me, he calls me Mishy. And he says to me, Mishy, I may not always want to speak to you. And I may not always have time to speak to you, or something along those lines. It was just like this slap in the face. And I literally sat down in the middle of the sidewalk with my back against a brick wall of the takeout food place I was going to go into. And I chatted with him, and we talked about Harry Potter and building Legos. And you know what? All this time later, that memory brings me so much joy. And you know what? Now he's heading into preteens, and he's not so interested in me right now. So, that's one example. Another example, I happened, typically when I travel, I hit a city and I leave immediately. And so I decided, wait a minute, there are certain things that I actually really like contemporary art and third wave coffee. Why don't, when I'm in a city for work, I look up some places where I can experience those things, and ideally take an extra day, which would allow me time to process my meetings, maybe come up with the real core nugget that's going to make the outcome productive, but also go be in some coffee houses and see some contemporary art. Those are some things that help fill my emotional wealth bucket. The third example I'll give, and again, what does it for me is going to be completely different than what does it for other people. I was in rural Maine, visiting a family with a home up here, summer home, and I fell in love with paddleboarding. I'd never done paddleboarding before. And so I went and I bought a cabin in rural Maine. My home is Portland, Oregon. And now I spend half the year in Portland, Oregon, half the year in rural Maine. And in the summer, I'm out on my paddleboard a ton. And the 30 minutes or 45 minutes a day that I'm out on it is not keeping me from being a competent professional, but the memories and the joy and the happiness it brings to me. And then also the ability, I live 5 feet from this lake, to be so close, to be able to do my work and then step outside. That's priceless. That's in my emotional wealth bucket. And I wouldn't have made any of those decisions when I was the woman on that plane trying to build that $6 billion business. And I bet you anything, I would have grown it to 12 if I had been doing some of these other things.
Manisha, thank you so much for sharing those examples. My last question is, and it is not connected to this topic, but it's my favorite question to ask. In the last few years, what were 2, 3 aha moments, realizations that really changed the way you look at life or the way you look at business, but something really changed in you after this?
So, that's such a good question. Aha number one, I would say, is when I was 20, I spent my junior year abroad at Oxford University, and on the way back, on the plane, I had drawn out on a cocktail napkin some core concepts that I wanted to guide my life by. And at the top of the triangle, I wrote simplicity. The bottom left corner, I wrote small joys. The bottom right corner, I wrote financial independence. And I wanted my life to be built on those core items. And a friend of mine, Carl Richards, who some people may know, he's a columnist. He was a columnist for 10 years at the New York Times, known as the Sketch Guy. He had drawn a sketch for me, big frame print. And when I was recovering from the inflammation of the Epstein-Barr, I was on the sofa and I could see into my home office where the picture was. And it's because I was lying down, it hit me that I had shifted that triangle in my mind so that the bottom was financial independence and the top was small joys and simplicity. In other words, I was rooting my life entirely in the financial concept to the exclusion of the guiding proponents of simplicity and small joys. And when I flipped that, everything changed for me. I felt that freshness again that I did when I was that student at Oxford. So that's aha number one. Aha number two was I started making time. So friends would say to me, like, will you talk to my daughter? Will you talk to my niece? Will you talk to this young woman on my team? And I used to always say yes, because I'd love to help promote and support women in their career growth. But I used to do it in such a rapid fire fashion. I'd give them 20 minutes. I tell them to come prepared with their questions. I'd answer them, and that was it. Now that was before the days of Zoom and FaceTime and all that. Now I set aside an hour and I try and learn a little bit about them beforehand. And I sit down and I get myself into a place and I think, I want to give, I want to share. And the joy I have gotten out of those sessions relative to the way I used to try and, quote, help people before when I was so busy, like night and day. And then the third aha came from my partner, Jay, who is remarkably supportive of my choice to live half the year in Portland and half the year in Maine, while he is living the whole year in Portland. And he's not a big lake person. He's a skier and a hiker. And so he comes out, but, this is my thing. And what I learned from him was it's not the quantity of the time we spend together that makes us such a great couple. It is the quality of the time. And I that was a revelation to me. I have found that he and I are closer than ever now that I've realized that even if it's just 3 deeply meaningful conversations a week, because we are all the way across the country from each other, that can build more of a relationship than spending hours together in a house when you don't talk to each other. So realizing that investing in your emotional wealth does not mean that you're giving up all the hours in your day. So those are my ahas.
Thank you, Manisha. I appreciate the level of openness you have, the level of how willing you are to really share and help as much as possible. Thank you so much for being so open and so generous. So this is a great place for me to ask anything that you want to share. Maybe something you wanted me to ask you and I didn't ask. And also, could you share with our audience where they can buy your book that is coming up and where they can learn more about your work?
So I think the main thing that I want to leave people with is that there is another way, that you can create a life that you love. You do not need to be stuck on that hamster wheel. You do not need to be trapped in a cult of never enough. And that is so powerful. And in the beginning, you kind of have to take it on faith, which is why, coming to your second point, where can people find me and my work? That's why I wrote this book, MoneyZen. Had I been in an earlier stage of my life, I would not have felt comfortable being as incredibly raw as I am in this book. Because I've achieved a level of success and work on, I am my own boss. So I don't need to be worrying about somebody else saying, why did you say that? I share a lot in this book because I know that the first steps have to be taken on faith. And I don't mean that in a religious sense. And so I wanted to share my story along with a deep array of interdisciplinary research. I interviewed top-notch experts in multiple fields. So there's science backing everything that I'm talking about in switching your mindset from self-worth equals net worth to one of financial health plus emotional wealth equals MoneyZen. But I felt that people would have more faith in the science and the validity of the journey if they really heard all the messy bits. So it's all in there. So that's what I would like people to know. And you can learn more about the book at moneyzenbook.com. And you can keep in touch with me at moneyzen.com. All my socials and contact information and everything is there.
Thank you, Manisha. Again, thank you so much for being so open and so generous with your advice. And for everyone listening, our guest today again has been Manisha Thakor. Check out Manisha's new book. It is called MoneyZen, The Secret to Finding Your Enough. And if you want to strengthen your strategy skills, get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies, free download, go to firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. And Firms Consulting is firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. Take care, and I look forward to connect with you next time. Bye, everyone.